So here's how the story goes. Today, of course, is the first day of the month of Av. It's the month of joy. But the story goes as follows. Haman had to choose a date for his final solution, extermination of all the Jews of the entire world. The Persian Empire, Median Persian Empire, which spanned 127 provinces. That's basically all of the inhabited known world. So he wants to get rid of all the Jews. And of course, we know others have tried this and haven't succeeded to do it. And he was going to pick a month. He was going to pick a month. He drew lots, and then the Megillah tells us no. After he picked the month, he also picked a day. Why did he do that? Because he thought to himself, "What if if I give myself a month to carry on this plan, and then it fails, and the Jews win, they're going to have a month of celebration. Ich verginn sie nicht. I'm not going to let them celebrate for that long, so I'm going to pick a day in the month, and that's when I'm going to carry out this plan. So if it fails, well, the Jews only have one day to celebrate and not a month." Guess what? That didn't work at all, because the Talmud tells us that Misha Nichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. When the month of Adar comes in, we increase in joy. There we go. That's a Talmud in Tanit, 29b. And the Talmud tells us when Adar comes in, then increase in joy. And the entire month becomes one of happiness. So Haman didn't quite get his way as far as that's concerned, because even though he chose a day, we ended up with a celebration that actually lasted a time, which begs the question: why a month-long celebration? Which kind of there's no other celebration of joy that lasts, permeates the entire month. Why is the joy of Purim connected with the month of Adar, and not just with the day that we celebrate on? Why an entire month? And if you read how the we need to got some people who are not muted, so let's quickly do this. Is one. Okay, hopefully it'll be a bit quieter now. Sorry about that. I'm back. Why would we have an entire month? If you look at the Megillah itself, I think it's chapter 9, where it describes the celebrations of Purim in subsequent years. It clearly makes mention of the month which had been transformed from one of grief and mourning to one of festive joy. So it seems it's not just a day, and the day is referred to the 14th and 15th of Adar, but actually the month, the days of feasting, merrymaking, and so forth, the entire month. Now, logically, in fact, there are implications to this, because not every community had a Megillah reader, a learner, so they had a system where you could actually hear the Megillah quite a bit earlier, and in villages they used to read it from the 11th onwards, so that everybody could benefit from the mitzvah of Megillah. So it's really a festival that permeates the entire month, and let's try to understand why the month. So let's go back to that fateful day when Haman drew the lots, and that's when Mordechai defies him, refuses to bow down to him, and he makes a decision that he's going to exterminate the entire Jewish people, the people of Mordechai, and he's going to do this on a day which he's going to choose, and he draws lots. And let's pull up the text of the Megillah as it describes Haman actually choosing the days. And here we are. So that's in the 3rd chapter of the book of Esther. And there he is, in the first month, the month of Nisan, 12th year of Achashverosh's reign. A pur means a lot, so the plural of pur is Purim, of course, we know what that means, was cast before Haman concerning every day and every month until it fell on the 12th month, that is the month of Adar. Now, I would think that would be a great cause of disappointment to Haman. I mean, this is happening in the first month. It's happening in the month of Nisan. That's a month of Pesach. And when you're excited about a plan, you really want it to be carried out, and then you draw lots for the most propitious days to do it, falls out a whole year later. That's kind of disappointing, that takes away the excitement of having to wait all that long for this to be carried out. Then he goes to Achashverosh, convinces him that this plan was to be carried out. Achashverosh, we know famously, removes his ring, signet ring, and gives it to him and says, "Go ahead and issue any edict or law that you want in my name and sign." When does this happen? Okay, we have it here on the 13th day of the first month. That's kind of, when is that? 2 days before Pesach. Pesach is on the 15th, so this is the day before Seder night. And Haman, and here we have the date. This is going to be happening when, on the 13th day of the 12th month of Adar. In other words, a full year later is when this plan of extermination of the people, of the Jewish people, is going to happen. So one would assume a source of disappointment to Haman that he has to wait that long. Turns out that he was super thrilled. Now, let it be remembered that most of the events of Purim are actually happening around Pesach. Okay, as we saw, the edict was issued a day before Pesach. Then the Jews had to fast for 3 days, and Esther went to approach the king. And so Esther's feasts with Achashverosh, Haman, and so forth, that is actually the Pesach Seders. Haman being hanged, I'm getting ahead of myself, that's actually happening on Chol HaMoed Pesach, second day Pesach most likely. So it's all happening around Pesach. That's when most of the plot of the story of the Megillah, the Purim, happens around Pesach time, Erev Pesach, and thereabouts. So the plan was to be carried out a year later. Why was this a cause, as we will see now in the Talmud, for for Haman to be extremely happy? And this is the Talmud, and it's in Megillah, Megillah, page 13b. The verse states, we just read the verse, they cast poor, that is the lot. And a sage taught the following baraita: once the lot fell in the month of Adar, Haman greatly rejoiced. He sees this as a favorable omen. The words in bold are the text of the Talmud, and the regular print, that's commentary. He said, the lot has fallen for me in the month that Moses died, which he assumes is a bad thing for the Jewish people. Okay, so here comes the interesting one. He did not know. Not only did Moses die on the 7th of Adar, he was also born the 7th of Adar. And therefore, it's also a time of rejoicing for the Jewish people. So what makes him happy? What makes him happy is the fact that it falls on Adar, even though it's a whole year away, but it's exciting because that's the month of Moshe's demise. And he sees that as an amazingly good omen. But the Talmud concludes it's not as good as he thinks. In fact, it turned out bad for him, because it's also the month of Moshe's birth, same day, 7th of Adar, his Yotzat, and birthday is going to be on Tuesday next week, 7th of Adar. Today's the 1st, Tuesday. As a result, it's a good day for the Jews. Now, if we analyze the text of the Talmud that tells us it's a good day for the Jews, we can poke some holes, and we need to dig a bit deeper to understand this properly. So here's, as I said, Talmud Megillah 13b. He didn't know that only did Moses die on the 7th of Adar, but he was also born on the 7th of Adar. So a few questions, and then in answering these questions, we'll actually understand what was going on in Haman's head and why we have that happy month. So what does it mean? He didn't know that Moshe died on the 7th of Adar. And he didn't know that he was born on the 7th of Adar. And I'll show you in a moment Let's do it now. Let's do it now. How do we know Moshe actually died and was born on the 7th of Adar? That is discussed in great length in the Talmud Kiddushin, where the Talmud tells us he actually died on the 7th of Adar and he was born the same day. How do we know? So when he died, that's in Dvarim, it says the children of Israel wept in the plains of Moab for 30 days. Okay. After the death of Moshe, that's already in the book of Joshua, Moshe, Hashem says to Joshua, Moses is dead, arise, cross the Jordan River. Past the middle of the camp, and tell them 3 days, you're crossing the river. So the people cross the river, and here it is on the 10th day of the first month. Okay, 10th day of the first month. Now count back. If the 10th day of the first month is when they cross the Jordan River, and you go back 33 days, that takes you to the 7th of Adar, being the day passed away is Yotzat. So how do we know it's also his birthday? So that's because Moshe, on his final day in the world, portion of Vayelech, and Moshe says, I'm 120 years old today. I can no more come in and out. So what does the verse add the word today? He simply should have said, I'm 120 years old. No, it was his birthday. He had turned 120 that very day. So we know it's the same day. So now going back to the statement of the Talmud in Megillah, he didn't know that Moshe was born. Well, we only know that Moshe died and was born. It's all linked in, all tied in to that Talmud. So how can he know one piece of history or not? Did he fall asleep during the Gemara share and didn't hear the end of it? That ties in the day of his death with the day of his birth. But anyway, what is the meaning of a birthday for somebody who has died? And I know that people who have lost a dear one will years and years and years later still remember the day they were born and their birthday. But it kind of really doesn't have any great relevance, because at the end of the day, the individual is dead. So, the birthday was relevant while he was alive. And once he's passed on, the Yotzah becomes relevant, the birthday becomes irrelevant, because at the end of the day, they're not alive. So what does it mean? He didn't know that Moshe was also born on the same day, but also is a bit strange is the sequence here. Not only did Moses die on the 7th, he was also born the 7th of Adar. But take out the commentary here. Just read the original text. He didn't know that Moses did die on the 7th of Adar and was also born the 7th. Didn't it happen the other way around, wasn't he? Well, most people, they're born first and they die later. So you record when they were born. So it should have said Moshe was born the 7th of Adar and then he died on the 7th of Adar. And the order, the sequence seems to be reversed. Now, let's now dig into why we celebrate on Purim, why we celebrate during the entire month of Nisan, and understand that. What does it mean? What causes joy? Okay. Why do we laugh at a joke well told? It's all about the punchline. The joke teller tells you a story and builds it up. And now you expect a certain ending, and then whoops, twist. And the ending is totally, that's humor. That's a joke. Then you laugh because you weren't expecting that. And it's just kind of, how do we get there? And that creates humor. And it's kind of, that month of Adar was supposed to be the end of the line for the Jews. That 13th of Adar was supposed to be a disaster day for the Jewish people. But how does the Megillah actually describe that 13th of Adar? Chapter, I think 8. Sorry, we've done that already. So we come to that text. On the 12th day, month of Adar, 13th day of the month, that was a day when the edict should have been carried out. V'nahafochu. It was the very opposite. Nahafochu. The opposite happened. So what happens is the Jews are now ruling over their enemies. Totally unexpected. Everyone thought that this was going to be the day of the end of the Jewish people, but that's not what happens. It's a day when the Jews end up ruling over those who are trying to cause them harm. And that's the joy. The joy here is the fact that the unexpected happened. The punchline was delivered, and wow, that's something we expected to happen. Now, why do we have this joy? Because Haman made a very big mistake. Haman, I'm going to use the words, and please don't take it wrong, but he's got a Goyish cup. Why do I say that? Because he views history in a linear way. In his mind, eras have got beginnings and ends. So every culture has dominated the world for so long and then came to an end. And just in the recent history of the world, Haman is aware that Egypt was the superpower, but then eventually that was it. And a few hundred years later, Babylon arose, but Babylon's heyday is now recently history. That empire has fallen, and there's been quite a power shift in the Middle East with the Median and Persian Empire, which were two separate empires which have merged under the rule of Achashverosh. And so, as far as Haman is concerned, the Jewish people fall into that as well. They have a beginning and they have an end. Beginning, that was the birth of the Jewish people, presumably Yetziat Mitzrayim, they came out of Egypt, and the Exodus, that was the birth of the Jewish people. And the end is near, says Haman. The end is about a year away. And there is the great joy. When does the lot fall? It falls during the month of Adar. And Adar is a month of Moshe's passing. As far as Haman's concerned, that's a great omen. The great leader of the Jewish people passed away. He could have had one better if maybe the lots had fallen the 7th of Adar. But what happened on the 13th of Adar? 13th of Adar was the end of the Shiva week for Moshe Rabbeinu. And kind of that's when people move on. The first 7 days of the intense mourning, the departed is still very much present, even though he's left. And then people start to forget and move on. And Moshe, 30 days of mourning, as we saw. But Haman's loving this. This plan is going to end up not on Moshe's Yotzat, but on the day when the Jewish people got up from Shiva and moved on. In other words, Moshe's sphere of influence came to an end. So Moshe was a powerful leader whose influence was so strongly felt, upon the Jewish people. It's coming to an end. That's Moshe Rabbeinu, and that was the source of his joy. What doesn't he know? He doesn't know that on the 7th of Adar, says the Talmud, Moshe died but was also born. What does the Gemara mean? If you go a little bit deeper, that as Moshe passed on, another Moshe arose to lead the Jewish people. In this case, it was Joshua. In every subsequent generation, as the page was turned on the one era of leadership, there is what the Zohar refers to as the Itpashtuta de Moshe, the stretching out, the reincarnation of Moshe in every generation. Well, there's an extension of Moshe in every single generation. There is that leader of the Jewish people that continues to exert that influence which Moshe did during his lifetime, which continues posthumously as he is embodied in other Jewish leaders. So when the Talmud says to us, Haman didn't realize that not only did Moshe die, but was also born, he's not talking about the birth that happened 120 years earlier, that too. He's talking about the birth that happened on the 7th of Adar, when he died and when there was a day of due leadership, and then Moshe passed on and Joshua took over. Haman didn't realize that the way the Jewish people works is not a line with a beginning and an end. It's actually a circle. And as one cycle ends, the other one begins immediately. And this is also why Haman was so excited not just about the day, but about the month. You see, Nisan is the month of our birth, of our beginning. That's when we left Egypt. And when we have a Jewish calendar, we're going to read the portion of HaChodesh in a couple of weeks. And that's all about the fact that we count our calendar. Chodesh HaRishon, the first month, is the month of Nisan, when the Jewish people were born as they came out of Egypt. Which would be, again, we'll come back to the Goyish cup that thinks linearly, the anti-Semites had, which would be the end of the line for the Jews. Obviously, the month most distant in time on that line from the month of Nisan. If Nisan's the first month, Adar is the 12th month, and that's the most propitious time when we are as a people so far away from our birth month. That's the month that has the worst mazel for the Jewish people. So that's, as I said, the anti-Semites said that views the Jews as people with a beginning and end point. And as far as Haman's concerned, the end point is going to happen when the influence of that month of Nisan is at its weakest, at its lowest, and that is during the month of Adar. That's why we rejoice on Adar, because we view history and the history of the Jewish people not as a line with a beginning and an end, but as a circle. Sometimes you're on top and sometimes you're at the bottom. In fact, that's where we are as a people compared to the moon, because the moon waxes and wanes. And sometimes it's full strength, and sometimes that strength and that power and that light is a little bit more subdued or totally absent, but it comes back. And Haman doesn't understand that. He fails to understand the concept of the cyclical rebirth of the people in its leadership. The words always used to express the demise of one leader and the ascent of another is Uva Shemesh v'zarach Shemesh, the sun set, the sun rose. As one sun sets, the other sun immediately rises. And that's in terms of our leadership, and in terms of our survival, we're going in circles, and therefore there is no beginning point and an end point. And that was the mistake. That's the punchline to the joke. We laugh and we rejoice during the month of Adar because of the transformative energy that is there, where it could be viewed, if you understand it incorrectly, as the month where the Jewish influence is at its weakest and lowest, but it turns out that it's the absolute opposite. And we ended up we ended up ruling over those enemies of ours who thought that they would see our end. So that's the power of the month of Adar, the month of joy. It's the entire month being the end of the line of the Jewish calendar, the 12th month, one perceived by those who want to see us destroyed as the one with the weakest energy, but to us, the energy of rebirth, and thus of laughter and of rejoicing. So you can begin today. It's already the second day of Rosh Chodesh, but today is 1 Adar. Yesterday was the 30th of Shvat, and you've got a full month ahead of you to tap into not only the joyous energy that permeates the entire month of Adar, but also the power of transformative energy that takes things that appear to be negative and turn them into a positive energy, one of rebirth. Thank you very much. Have a good night.